In 1961, on the north side of the Grand Canyon, my patrol walked into a place the maps called the Shadow Sector. I still see the light that morning. Thin, pale. It came from the wrong angle. We moved single file along the rim, quiet, trying to keep our minds on the job. The air felt heavy for that height. My boots sank in dust that smelled like old metal and dry meat. I thought it came from a dead pack mule or some broken gear down in the gorge. I was wrong. Our orders said we were looking for lost seismic tools. Simple task. Walk in, find the rig. Walk out. Nothing in those pages warned us about the strange echo under our steps or the way the canyon swallowed our radio calls as if it were listening. By the time the sun cleared the far ridge, one of our men was already missing, and none of us wanted to say his name out loud. Before we start the video, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. It only takes a second. I first heard about the Shadow Sector in early summer of 1961, though no one used that name inside the unit. The papers called it a simple training zone near the Grand Canyon. Off the record, the older men said it was a place where compasses lost their nerve. Our detachment worked strange jobs like that. We were the group that went where the regular units did not want to go. Not because we were special, but because we knew how to move quiet, carry light, and come back with clean notes. Back then, I was a staff sergeant in a small recon team that lived from one odd assignment to the next. Most weeks, we trained around the dry hills near Nevada. Sometimes we pulled security for scientists or tested new sensors in the desert. Other times, we walked into canyons to collect broken gear that no one else had the right papers to touch. Those jobs never made sense on paper. They fit together only if you stopped asking questions. I had spent the spring observing a test site west of Groom Lake. We watched seismic tools shake under distant blasts. Dust drifted into every gap in our coats. The ground held a strong, burnt metal scent that stayed on our skin long after we showered. That smell returned to me in the Shadow Sector, though I did not know it yet. Our team had 7 men at the start of summer. The lieutenant was new and eager, proud of his academy polish. He had the right walk, the right haircut, the right tone. None of it mattered down in the dark. He saw the world through orders and maps. The canyon cured that fast. We also had a medic named Warren. He was thin and steady, never raised his voice, always checking pulses and water levels. He had seen enough field injuries to know what fear did to the heart. There was a radio man named Holt who kept his set tuned like it was a living thing. He slept with one ear open, always waiting for a signal. Our automatic rifleman, Cole, was a strong man with a wide back. He hid his nerves behind humor. Once we got deeper in, the joke stopped. Another sergeant, Mason, had fought in Korea. He understood rough ground and hard choices. He kept to himself but watched everything. Last was the scout, a Navajo tracker named Byers. He said little, but he could read land the way others read a newspaper. He was the first man I trusted on any route. We should have been heading into a normal desert navigation course when the call came. Instead, a truck picked us up before sunrise and took us to a small temporary site near the canyon. The place looked thrown together in a hurry. 2 tents, 1 jeep, a guard who did not speak much. An intelligence major waited for us with a thin folder. He wore a stiff uniform and kept his hat on even inside the tent. He opened the folder and spread out a set of aerial photos. One image showed a dark patch on the canyon floor where the light should have been bright. The major said a small survey team had carried seismic tools down there the week before. Their last report mentioned strange light in a side canyon and non-mapped structures. After that, the tools went silent. The major said the failure was likely from a rock slide. He spoke straight, but his eyes did not match his voice. Something weighed on him. He told us our task was simple: go down, find the lost gear, bring it out. No mention of rescue. No mention of the survey men. I asked if we were looking for them. The major paused, then said to keep our eyes open, but to stay on mission. That was the first sign the job was not what it seemed. We flew to the rim at dawn. The helicopter pilot refused to go near the deeper section. He said the air there dropped out, like something drained it. He left us at a spot where the canyon widened. A thin wind moved across the rim and brought that dry metal smell with it. I looked at Byers. He watched the wind with a stiff jaw, as if it carried a warning. We checked our gear on the ground. Light packs, ropes, pitons, canteens, first aid, limited rounds for each rifle. The lieutenant ran through the plan. Drop down the marked route, cross a flat ledge, then follow the survey team's last known path. On the map, it looked clean and simple. When I looked over the rim, the canyon below did not match the lines on the paper. Some walls looked steeper than they should have been. Some shadows looked deeper. We started down before the sun reached its height. The first stretch felt normal. Loose rock, dry steps, a bit of echo under our boots. Then the air changed. The deeper we went, the more the smell thickened. Not strong enough to make us gag, just enough to sit in the throat. Something like warm metal and something else I still cannot name. Byers paused near an old rock marker placed long ago by survey teams. He touched it with his fingertips, then stepped back. He said the stone did not match its usual place, as if someone had pushed it a short distance. I asked who. He said it did not feel like a person. The map said we should reach a wide shelf before midday. Instead, the descent took longer. My legs grew heavy, though the drop was not that steep. When we reached the shelf, the sun was already lower than expected. That was when we found the first signs of the earlier team. A crushed canteen, a torn scrap of cloth, a rope that had rolled into a crack and lay in dust. No clear prints, no sign of trouble, no sign of normal retreat either. I tried to raise command on the radio. Holt worked the set with clean motions, but the static thickened fast. The last clear word from command cut off mid-sentence, like someone pulled the wire from the wall. We made camp on that narrow shelf, though none of us liked the spot. The walls loomed higher than they had when we first looked from above. The air cooled fast. The smell rose from the deeper cracks. Then came the soft rock fall sound from far below. Gloss, even, too steady to be natural. We listened in silence as the pattern repeated, and the rim above us grew darker than the sky should allow. We moved at first light. None of us slept well on that narrow shelf. The rock fall pattern had repeated through the night, steady as breathing. It came from somewhere deep, far below where our ropes could ever reach. The sound did not echo like normal. It slid through the stone and reached us without losing strength. I tried to tell myself it was loose rock settling, but I had walked enough canyons to know the difference. This pattern felt timed, as if something down there shifted its weight in slow, patient turns. We checked our ropes and gear. Water was still good. Ammunition, untouched. The lieutenant kept his voice firm, though he looked pale. He said we would reach the deeper route by midday. He spoke with confidence that did not match the map or the strange silence around us. Byers stood apart from us, looking at the canyon lines ahead. His face held a tense stillness. When I asked if he saw anything, he only said the land felt wrong. Not dangerous in a normal sense, just wrong. Like the ground wanted to trick our feet. The descent ahead was steeper than the chart showed. According to the map, we were supposed to cross a gentle angle. Instead, we faced a slope that curved down in a long sweep of loose stone. The angle was sharper than expected. Holt tried the radio again, hoping for a clear line from higher ground, but the static rose the moment he keyed the mic. A steady hum filled the headset. He shook his head and packed it away. That left us on our own. Halfway down the slope, we found tracks that did not fit. Not footprints, not animal marks. Long, faint lines that ran across the stone as if something heavy had been dragged sideways, but without the usual scrape. The lines were smooth, almost polished. Mason bent down and ran his fingers over them. He looked up at me without a word. Whatever made those lines did not act like any gear or tool we knew. The air thickened as we moved lower. The smell returned, stronger now. A dry, metallic odor mixed with something like old meat left in sunless shade. The scent came from deeper tunnels and cracks. Each time the wind shifted, a thin wave of it rolled across our faces. No one spoke about it. We did not need to. We reached a junction where two narrow paths crossed. One path was marked on the map. The other was not. The unmarked route ran between two tall walls that seemed closer together than the map lines allowed. The lieutenant chose the marked route to stay within orders. Byers watched the unmarked one with a stiff jaw, as if he knew it led to something we were not ready to see. Our route curved around a sharp drop. The canyon floor below us lay in cold shadow. The sun above looked thin, as if some of its strength failed to reach the stone. We moved along the ledge, single file. Cole kept his rifle low but ready. Mason counted our steps in quiet habit. I did not blame him. The ledge looked stable, but the air felt off. The canyon had a way of changing shape while we were not looking. Near midday, though our watches said it was still early, we reached the spot the Major had circled on the aerial photos. Here we found the first real sign of the lost survey team. A half-collapsed tent sat on a flat patch of stone. One of the poles had snapped. A tin cup lay upside down beside it. The ground around the tent was smooth, too smooth for a site this rough. The dust pattern looked wiped or brushed by something broad. Inside the tent we found a notebook with 2 pages torn out. The remaining pages held short, rushed notes. Words like light in the walls, strange echo, and pattern under steps. The last note ended mid-sentence, as if the writer had put the book down and never returned. We found no bodies, no packs, no bedrolls. Even their stove was gone. Only the tent and the notebook remained. Holt called out softly, hoping for a response. Nothing answered, not even an echo. The lieutenant ordered us to keep moving. He said our goal was the deeper route where the seismic tools had last sent a signal. Byers stared at the ground before stepping forward. He said the dust pattern looked like someone had been pushed or pulled away from the tent in a straight line, though he found no boot marks to match that idea. We followed the path toward the deeper bend. The rockfall sound returned with more weight. The time between each shift felt even and slow, as if the canyon kept track of us. We all heard it, though no one named it. Around the bend, the canyon tightened into a steep chute. The walls rose high, smooth, as if the wind had carved them for 1,000 years. But the marks on some sections did not match wind or water. They ran in straight lines, deep grooves spaced evenly apart like crude cuts made long ago by something that understood force but not precision. We reached another shelf for a short rest. I checked the angle of the walls. The height felt wrong again. According to the map, they should have been no taller than a few poles stacked end to end. Yet they looked far higher, like towers. The altimeter said we were not that deep, but my legs told a different story. The canyon played tricks with scale. You could not trust the eye here. The sun dipped faster than it should have. The shadows stretched long and thin. We set our next camp early. No one complained. The ground under us felt cold, as if the stone held the slow pulse. The metallic odor drifted up from the cracks like breath. When darkness settled, the rockfall pattern pulsed again. Slow, even, patient. We listened in silence. None of us said that it felt closer than the night before. We broke camp before dawn. The night had been long. The cold settled into our bones in a strange way, as if the stone under us breathed out warmth and then pulled it back without warning. I woke twice to that slow rockfall pattern deep below. Each time it felt closer, though I told myself it could not be. Nothing that steady should move under solid ground. We started down the chute in single file. The walls rose on both sides, smooth and tall. The air grew cooler with each step, carrying that dry metallic smell that stuck to the back of the throat. My boots scraped rock that felt too soft for its age. When the light reached us from above, it arrived thin, as if strained through dust. Byers led the way with small, careful steps. He paused often to check the ground. His face carried the same tight worry I had seen the day before. He told me in a low voice that the canyon lines felt shifted, though he could not explain how. I trusted him. He had read ground all his life. If he said something was off, then it was. We reached a narrow run where the ground dipped. There we found a piece of metal half buried in sand. Holt brushed it clean and lifted it. It was part of a seismic recorder. The casing had been bent inward as if crushed by great pressure, not dropped, not hit, squeezed. I had seen crushed metal from explosions, but this shape did not match that. There was no burn, no heat mark. Only a smooth, inward bend, neat and cold. Near it lay a cable that had been dragged. The marks on the stone showed that the cable moved toward the deeper section, not away from it. Something had pulled the gear downhill. The lieutenant wrote this in his notebook without comment. His hand shook once before he covered it by adjusting his strap. We kept moving. The route grew tighter. The walls narrowed until we could touch both sides with our hands. Echoes behaved strangely here. Our steps came back in slow repeats, out of time, as if another group followed just behind us. When we stopped, the echoes kept going for a few seconds. Cole muttered under his breath, but no one asked him what he heard. At one point, we had to pass through a slot so thin we had to remove our packs and push them ahead. The smell inside that slot held the same mix of metal and old meat. The scent clung to the stone. I breathed through my sleeve, but the air still tasted heavy. Halfway through, the echo of our movement changed. It returned in a low tone that sounded like our own steps, but slower, as if our past selves walked behind us. When we came out the other side, the canyon opened into a wide bowl. The floor of the bowl was flat and covered in fine dust. The light was even here, but weak. It felt like standing under an overcast sky, though the sky above was clear. The dust carried faint footprints, but they did not lead anywhere. They stopped, then faded into smooth ground. The prints were fresh enough to hold shape, yet too many hours had passed since the survey team vanished. In the center of the bowl, we found more equipment. A tripod had fallen on its side, legs snapped. A coil of wire sat in a neat circle. A steel case lay open, empty except for a few papers stuck to the bottom. When I lifted one, it tore in my hand like wet tissue, though the air was dry. Mason looked at the torn edge and said nothing. None of us liked the way the paper had softened. The lieutenant checked his map again. His eyes stayed on the page too long, as if hoping the lines would correct themselves. He told us we were close to the last known coordinates of the survey team. His voice carried more strain now. Orders mattered to him, but the canyon did not care about orders. We moved onward toward the far wall of the bowl. There we found a narrow descent that led deeper. The entrance to the route looked carved rather than natural. The walls had faint grooves running down them. Not enough to call them tool marks, but straight enough to raise doubt. The grooves felt old, older than any man-made cut would appear in a place like this. Byers ran his hand along one groove. He pulled back fast, as if the stone were warm, though the air was cold. He did not speak. He simply shook his head and signaled that we should move with care. We descended again. The deeper we went, the more the canyon pressed in. Sound changed. It no longer bounced. It slid along the walls in slow waves. The rockfall pattern rolled through the stone at long, even spaces. Each time I felt it in my legs before I heard it. At a small ledge, Holt finally caught a short radio signal. A few broken words, weak, out of order, something like status last, report negative, then a burst of static. We asked him to try again, but the signal died. He swore the voice sounded like one of ours, speaking words none of us had said. He looked shaken. We reached another flattened space. The remains of a camp sat there, not destroyed, not scattered, just left behind. A small stove still held cold ash. A bedroll lay open, as if someone stepped away for a moment and never returned. A can of rations had been opened and left half-eaten. Mold covered the food. Too fast, too heavy for a place this dry. Cole kicked the stone. It rolled a short distance and stopped. Then it shifted again, as if nudged by something we could not see. No one moved toward it. The lieutenant ordered us forward. He said the final target lay ahead where the canyon narrowed again. He did his best to show command, but the canyon had its own way of breaking confidence. His words sounded thin in the still air. As we advanced, the ground under my boots felt different, as if hollow. The rockfall pattern came again, slow and even. This time, the timing lined up with our last steps, almost like something answered with each short pause we made. The deeper we moved, the more the walls distorted. Heights felt wrong, distances stretched. My usual sense of terrain lost its grip. By late afternoon, we reached the bend where the survey team had last sent a signal. We soon saw that nothing ahead of us matched any map ever drawn. The bend ahead tightened like a throat. The walls leaned inward, close enough to block most of the light. We moved in a line, slow and careful, each man watching the ground and the walls. The air cooled again. The metallic smell settled heavier in the space between us, almost like fog. My pulse felt louder than my steps. I could tell the others felt it too. Byers stopped near the mouth of the bend. He crouched, touched the dust, and let it run through his fingers. He did not say a word. Then he stood and walked ahead without looking back. That was unlike him. He never moved forward without a sign or a call. Something in that moment felt wrong, but we followed him because the path allowed no other choice. The narrow passage forced us to move shoulder against stone. The rock felt smooth in some places and strangely warm in others. When my hand brushed one of the warm spots, I pulled away fast. It was not natural. Stone that deep should hold the night's cold, not a slow heat. At the far end of the passage, we reached a small drop. 3 or 4 body lengths down sat another shelf. The lieutenant ordered us to lower our packs first. We used a rope, checking each knot. The rope swung in a slow arc that did not match the wind. It drifted toward the center of the canyon, as if pulled by some steady current. We climbed down one by one. When my boots hit the lower shelf, the ground felt different, softer, as if the stone had a thin layer of powder that shifted under weight. I crouched and touched it. It felt like fine dust, but carried that same metallic smell stronger than before. The smell rose from small cracks that ran across the shelf like veins. Holt checked the radio again. The hum returned, steady and calm, as if the static itself had a pattern. He swore he heard faint voices under the hum, not clear words, just tones, almost like someone whispering far away through metal. We reached the point where the canyon widened again. This was where the map showed a clear, simple route toward the deeper survey site. Instead, the ground split in 2 sharp drops. One led down into shadow. The other curved along a narrow bridge of stone that seemed too thin to trust. Neither path matched the chart. The lieutenant chose the lower drop, saying it fit the general direction of the last signal. He sounded confident, but I could hear strain in his voice. He wanted the mission to stay simple. The canyon did not care about simple. We began the descent. Ropes out, weapons slung tight. The drop felt steeper than it looked. The walls rose higher with each step down. My altimeter readings did not match the time we spent or the angle we walked. It showed small changes when the descent should have been large. The air felt heavier with each yard. My breaths grew short, as if the canyon pressed its weight on my chest. Halfway down, Byers moved out of sight around a corner. He never walked far from us. He always checked back. This time, he did not. When we rounded the same corner, we saw his boot prints in the dust. Then they ended at bare, smooth rock. No fall marks, no slide. No blood, no broken gear. Just an end, as if he had stepped into empty air that had no drop. Mason whispered a short breath through his teeth. Cole tightened his grip on his rifle. Holt looked up the slope as if hoping to find another path. The lieutenant ordered us to spread out and check the edges, but the ledge was clean. Nothing waited below. No gap where a man could disappear, only a long crack that exhaled the heavy metallic smell. We marked the spot. The lieutenant wrote down the time and place. His hand trembled so slightly I almost missed it. He tried to hold himself firm for the rest of us, but his eyes showed doubt. Losing a scout like that hits any unit hard. Losing one without a reason hits harder. We pulled back together and pushed onward. The deeper path curved into a tight S shape. The walls here felt uneven, as if something had pushed from within long ago. I touched one bulge with my hand. The stone gave a faint vibration, like distant movement behind it. I stepped back fast. I did not tell the others what I felt. They already had enough weight in their heads. The light dimmed again until the canyon looked like dusk under full day. We used lanterns. Their glow touched only a small part of the walls. Shadows stretched where no shadows should be. We heard our own movement in strange patterns. Sometimes an echo came back with an extra step, like another pair of boots followed behind us. The farther we moved, the stronger the smell grew. Not enough to choke us, but enough to sit deep in the throat. The cracks along the walls widened into thin seams. Cold air flowed from them in short breaths. We reached a small crossing where the rot formed a natural bridge. Cole stepped onto it first. He stopped halfway and turned his head, slow, as if listening to something below. He whispered that he heard movement. Not wind, not rock, movement. I stepped up behind him. I heard nothing at first. Then I felt a faint shift through the soles of my boots. A slow move, like something dragging weight deeper below the stone. When I looked back to check the others, Cole was gone. One blink, gone. No cry, no jump, no fall sound. His rifle lay on the bridge, safety off. The stone around it held no scuffs, no sign of his boots pushing off. It looked as if he stepped clean out of the world. The lieutenant froze. Holt backed away. Mason swore under his breath. I picked up Cole's rifle and checked the bridge. It held steady. No break, no loose edge. It made no sense. None of this did. We crossed the bridge with slow steps. Each footfall felt like a risk. The air on that span felt warm, as if heated by something below. When I reached the other side, my legs were shaking. The lieutenant insisted we press forward. His voice cracked once. He said we were too close to the target to turn back. But Holt and Mason both said the same thing I felt: we needed to retreat. The canyon had taken 2 men without a sound. If we stayed longer, it would take the rest. The lieutenant refused. He put mission above survival. That was when we knew the canyon had started to work on his mind. Something about this place stirred doubt in even the strongest men. We followed him anyway because rank still existed, even in a place that broke sense. The ground ahead began to slope deeper, and the canyon walls changed shape again. We did not know it yet, but we were walking straight toward the point where this mission would break open and show its real purpose. The air grew colder as we moved down the last stretch of the slope. The walls changed shape again, pulling inward, then bending away as if something inside had swollen and then settled. The light dimmed without warning. It felt like a cloud passed overhead, though the sky was far above and out of sight. The ground under my boots turned firm at first, then soft again, as if the rock had pockets of powder inside it. We found the main sensor array at a narrow shelf that hung above a deep shaft. The shelf looked stable enough, but the echo around it carried a strange weight. The shaft below was not on any map. It opened like a long wound in the canyon floor. A faint draft rose from it, carrying the same metallic smell that had followed us since the first night. This time the smell felt thicker, almost warm. The equipment lay scattered on the shelf. Some pieces looked old. Others looked newer than anything listed in our mission papers. One recorder dangled on a cable that ran down into the shaft. The cable swayed though there was no wind. Holt crouched beside one of the metal cases. He ran his hand along the surface and frowned. The casing had been bent inward, the same way as the piece we found earlier. Not dented, pressed. The lieutenant opened the main equipment crate. Inside lay a sealed envelope marked with his name. The label told him to open it only after reaching the target. He stepped aside and opened it alone. We watched his face as he read. His expression tightened. His jaw locked hard. When he returned, he claimed the note held only extraction details. But the edge of a loose page slipped from his hand when a gust moved through the shaft. I caught it before it slid off the ledge. The page held a few short lines. Words like subsurface movement, repeated displacements, and possible artificial voids. Another line warned that any unusual events should not be reported through open channels. I handed the page back without a word. The lieutenant folded it with a stiff motion, as if trying to hide the truth from himself. We approached the shaft. The opening stretched farther than the light from our lamps could reach. When I leaned forward, I felt a slow pulse of cool air rise from below. Not a breeze. A pulse. As if the darkness breathed on us. The rockfall pattern returned a moment later, slow. Even. It sounded deeper now, as though whatever made that sound lay far down in the hidden parts of the canyon. Mason knelt at the edge and swung his lantern. The light caught the smooth inner walls of the shaft. No natural canyon walls looked like that. These surfaces were straight in some places, rounded in others, like something had shaped the stone but left the work unfinished. The edges held faint scratches, not fresh, old and faded, yet the pattern looked too regular to be made by falling rock. The lieutenant said we would descend to a lower ridge to reach another angle of the shaft. He spoke with tense certainty, the kind that comes when a man wants to force order onto something that refuses it. I did not like the idea of going that low. Holt and Mason did not like it either. But the lieutenant held rank. Orders stayed orders, even here. Before we moved, I noticed the dust. It drifted across the shelf in a steady line. Not random, not scattered by wind. A thin trail ran from the shaft toward the far wall, as if something had been dragged away from the opening. No footprints, only the drag. The trail was straight, clean, and long. I did not say what I thought. No one would have wanted to hear it. We anchored a rope at the ridge and prepared to move. The canyon felt tight around us, as if the walls leaned closer to listen. That was when the ground began to change again. The path to the lower ridge twisted in a slow, spiraling curve. The rock underfoot felt uneven, as if shaped by hands too large or too careless. The deeper we moved, the weaker our lights felt. Lantern beams reached only a short distance before fading into a dull haze. The walls bent inward, then outward, in shapes I could not explain. Some sections looked like normal canyon stone. Others held deep grooves that looked almost like markings. They were too wide to be tool cuts and too straight to be natural. When I touched one groove, I felt a faint warmth, as if something behind the stone gave off heat that should not have been there. Our voices echoed strangely. When we spoke, the words came back stretched or delayed. Once, when Holt asked for a water check, the echo returned in his own voice, but with a tone that did not sound like him. He froze. None of us mentioned it. We reached a narrow turn where the ground dipped. There we found the first true sign that time in the shadow sector did not behave as it should. A broken helmet lay on the ground. Its paint had faded. The crack down the center looked old. We thought it belonged to one of the survey men. But beside the helmet lay a food tin with a stamped date that made no sense. A date that had not happened yet. Not by years. The metal was clean and new, as if placed there the day before. The lieutenant stared at the helmet and tin for a long moment. His breathing grew uneven. Then he ordered us to leave them and keep moving. I picked up the helmet by instinct. It felt cold, almost damp. When I held it near the lantern, I saw faint dust inside it. The dust was the same strange powder that covered the lower shelves. We moved farther down. The rockfall pattern came again, slower this time. The spacing stretched. It felt like something below waited for us to stop. It matched our pauses with its own. We set up a small rest point on a cramped ledge. Mason took the first watch. Holt tried to check the radio again. Static filled the speaker, then cleared for a moment. A faint voice broke through. The words were soft and calm. A report, a status call. But it was not from command. It sounded like one of ours. It used our call signs, and then it used our names. all in past tense, as if reading from a list of casualties. Holt dropped the radio. His hands shook. Mason stepped closer to the ledge, scanning the darkness. I looked at the lieutenant. His face had gone pale, drained of reason. The canyon had worn him down. He whispered something about recording cycles and geologic loops, words that made no sense in a place like this. We rested in silence. I dozed for a short moment. When I woke, I heard someone speaking softly near the wall. The voice matched our missing scout. Calm, even. He spoke a line I remembered him saying on our first day in the canyon. But when I stood and looked around, there was no one there. Only the slow drift of dust. The lieutenant gathered us soon after. He admitted the mission's real purpose was not to find missing tools. We had been sent to observe whatever lay beneath the shadow sector, to watch how the canyon reacted to us, to see how the land changed. The earlier patrol had been part of the same plan. He did not finish the rest of the truth. He did not need to. We all understood then that we had been sent into a place that did not want us to understand it. The walls around us creaked with the next long shift of the rockfall pattern. We had reached the point where the canyon would no longer let us move without cost. The next descent brought us to a ridge that curved toward the shaft's lower mouth. The light from our lanterns shook across the stone, though our hands stayed steady. The air rose in soft breaths from the depths. Each breath carried the same thick metallic scent we had felt since entering the shadow sector, but now it held a damp edge, as if mixed with cold moisture from far below. The lieutenant ordered Mason to rig a line across a narrow drop. Mason did it without comment. His face stayed tight, his jaw set. He clipped the rope to a line of old iron stakes left by the earlier patrol. The stakes leaned at odd angles, like they had shifted after being driven in. Some were pulled half out, though the ground around them looked untouched. The rope eased down the side of the ridge. We lowered the medic, Warren, first. He was the lightest and had the best balance. As he dropped, he called out measurements of distance. His voice sounded normal at first, then thin, then doubled. The second voice came half a breath after the first, repeating his own words. He did not seem to notice. When Warren reached the lower shelf, he swung his lantern toward the shaft. The beam spread across smooth stone. He said the smell down there was stronger, thick enough to taste. His voice trembled as he spoke. He said the walls felt close, though the shelf stretched far across the empty dark. He used a word he rarely used, wrong. The lieutenant told him to retrieve the recorder hanging by the cable. Warren stepped forward, slow and careful. The cable swayed again. Once, twice. Then it stopped, as if something had grabbed it from below and held it still. Warren hesitated. I could see his lantern shaking in his hand, though he held a steady grip on most days. He climbed down another few steps. He reached the recorder. His glove touched the casing. That was when the rope went slack. The line jerked in my hands. For an instant, I thought Warren had fallen. Mason shouted for us to hold the rope tight. Holt ran to the edge. The lieutenant called Warren's name, his voice cracking with strain. Then Warren spoke from behind us. His voice came from the ledge where we stood. We spun around. He stood there, pale, shaking, boots covered in dust. His harness was unbuckled. He did not remember the descent. His hands were blistered, raw as if he had hung from the rope for hours. His eyes darted from us to the shaft, wide with fear. We pulled the rope up. The harness hung empty. The hook was still fastened. The rope itself was warm, as if dragged across something soft. None of us wanted to touch it longer than we had to. The lieutenant dropped to one knee and held his head in both hands. He whispered that the canyon was folding time. His voice broke into uneven breaths. I had never seen an officer lose grip like that. The canyon had taken hold of his mind and squeezed until reason slipped through his fingers. We tried to regroup. We needed to climb back up the ridge. But the rockfall pattern pulsed again, slow and calm. It rose from the shaft and through the ridge beneath our boots, making the stone feel alive. I could feel each pulse in my legs, as if matching the beat of my own heart. We tried to move up the slope, but the canyon had shifted. The walls now leaned at sharper angles. The path had thickened with dust that had not been there minutes before. Our lantern beams reached only a few arm lengths before fading into flat darkness. Then the radio crackled again. A clear, steady voice spoke our call signs. It listed our names. It said we had been lost due to non-recoverable conditions. It spoke those words in a calm tone, as if reading from a standard report. At the end of each line came the faint rumble of the rockfall pattern. Each rumble matched my pulse, slow and heavy. Holt threw the radio down the slope. The sound echoed back, repeated and stretched, as if the canyon played it back from different depths. When the echo faded, the metallic smell grew sharper. The lieutenant stood and drew his pistol. He pointed it at the darkness, then at us, then at the shaft. His hand shook. His eyes lost focus. He said the canyon needed more data. He said we must finish the profile. His voice carried a brittle clarity, like something inside him had cracked but not fully broken. I stepped toward him. Mason moved closer too, slow and calm, hands open. The lieutenant kept the pistol pointed at the ground, then raised it again. His thoughts scattered in front of us, shifting as quickly as the canyon walls. I reached for the pistol. He pulled back. The barrel swept across my chest. I felt my breath freeze in my throat. Holt held a hand out, telling him to take it easy. Warren stepped behind the lieutenant, shaking, but ready to help restrain him. The canyon pulsed again. Stone shifted under my boots. A faint tremor rolled through the ridge. Dust rose in thin lines. I pushed forward, my hand wrapped around the pistol. The lieutenant struggled, weak but desperate. Mason held his arm. Holt grabbed the slide. Warren steadied the lieutenant's shoulder. In that short moment, the lieutenant's foot slid. He staggered back toward the edge. His eyes widened. For a second, he seemed to realize where he stood. Then the stone behind him changed shape. It looked flat, then hollow, then flat again. He stepped into it. He did not fall. He did not scream. He simply vanished, as if the canyon swallowed him between one breath and the next. His pistol clattered on the stone at our feet. We stood frozen. 4 men left. The canyon breathed around us. And somewhere in the dark, the next long pulse began to rise. For a long moment we stood still, staring at the place where the lieutenant had vanished. The air did not move. No echo came from below. No dust fell. It was as if the canyon wanted to mark the moment, hold it in place, and show us how small we were. The empty space where he had stood looked smooth, like untouched stone. No footprint, no scuff, no sign he had ever been there. Mason knelt and pressed his hand to the rock. He pulled it back at once. His palm was shaking. He said the stone felt warm in one spot and cold in another, like temperature shifted under the surface. Warren stared at the ledge with wide eyes. He whispered that the canyon had taken the lieutenant the same way it had taken the others. Holt stepped back, saying nothing. Shock had drained his voice. We did not waste time. The canyon had chosen its moment, and we knew we were next if we stayed. I took command without words. The others looked to me, waiting. I told them you were climbing back to the ridge. No one argued. We packed fast. Mason took the lead. Warren stayed close to me. Holt checked the last lantern. We started up the slope. The air around us felt tight, as if the canyon pressed inward. Shadows shifted across the walls, even though our lantern stayed steady. Every few steps, I felt a faint vibration in the ground, like something heavy moved just below the stone. Not fast, slow, patient. The same pattern we had heard since the first day. The climb grew harder. The slope felt steeper than before. Dust slid under our boots in soft waves. The walls looked taller, as if they stretched upward each time we blinked. My breath grew short. Every step felt heavier than the last. The canyon wanted to drag us back down. Halfway up, the walls changed shape again. The path narrowed. Edges we had used earlier now sat farther away, like the rock had shifted them in our absence. Holt tried to find the marks we left during descent, but they had faded. He swept his lantern across the walls. The light showed faint grooves that had not been there before. The grooves ran upward, smooth and shallow, like something had dragged weight along the walls. We kept climbing. Warren's breath turned sharp. Mason kept steady, though I saw his steps slow. Holt checked the radio out of habit. Static answered him, then a faint voice. Our voice, saying the same casualty report from earlier. But now, the voice sounded less distant, more calm. It listed us again, name by name, as if reading our future. We turned off the radio. A sharp wind moved through the ridge. It came from below, carrying the thick metallic smell that had chased us for days. It rose in one long breath. When it passed, the rotfall pattern followed. Longer this time, heavier, close enough that I felt it in my ribs. We reached the narrow bridge where Cole had vanished. The space looked the same. Smooth stone, thin path, empty air below. But something had changed. The bridge was longer, or the shelf on the far side had moved. Either the canyon stretched the distance or our eyes had lost their sense of scale. I measured it in my mind using simple images. 2 trucks long, then 3, then 2 again. My sense of distance shifted each time I blinked. We stepped onto the bridge, one at a time. Mason first, then Holt, then Warren. I followed last. The stone under us felt warm again. Faint vibrations rose through the soles of my boots. The air on the bridge held the heavy smell, almost thick enough to taste. Warren whispered that he felt someone walking beside him. Holt told him to keep his eyes forward. As we reached the halfway point, the canyon gave a long pulse. The stone under us trembled. Dust drifted from the cracks. The bridge tilted a small degree to the right. We froze. Lantern light trembled across the walls. The pulse continued, slow, even, matching the beat inside my chest. I signaled the others to move fast. No running. Just steady steps. We crossed the rest of the bridge. When my boots reached the far side, the ground felt firmer, though the air remained thick. We kept moving. The climb was not far now, though the canyon twisted, making familiar paths look new. We found the chute we had descended earlier, but its angle had changed. The stone seemed to have shifted. Where one wall once leaned outward, it now pressed inward, making the space tighter. We squeezed through. The metallic smell faded slightly. The vibrations grew weaker. That gave me a small hope. The ridge above was near. Then Holt cried out. A short cry, sharp and cut off. We turned fast. His lantern lay on the ground. His rifle, too. Holt himself was gone, not behind us. Not ahead, not in any crack or drop. The dust where he had stood was smooth again, the way it had been with the others, as if the canyon erased him cleanly. Warren backed up against the wall, shaking. Mason closed his eyes and let out one long breath. I looked at the lantern on the ground. The light flickered as if touched by a faint wind. The canyon waited. We had no time to search. We had no time to call for him. The canyon was moving again. The next long pulse rolled through the walls. The dust rose. The air thickened. The smell returned. We climbed without looking back. The slope forced us to crawl for a few yards. The stone scraped my palms. My legs burned. Every inhale felt slow. When we reached the final turn, a faint trace of daylight reached down through the upper cracks. The sight of it gave us strength. We climbed the last rise. The air changed. The smell thinned. The vibrations grew faint, then quiet. The canyon behind us darkened as if closing its throat. We reached the upper ledge that looked closer to normal ground. Mason fell to his knees. Warren leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breath shaking. I looked down into the dark we had escaped. The slow rockfall pattern rose once more from the depths. One last even pulse. Then silence. The helicopter reached us faster than it should have. I remember the rotors cutting the light, dust rising in long threads around us. Warren waved a flare with a weak arm. Mason sat still, staring at the canyon mouth as if waiting for it to open again. The crew pulled us inside without questions. They did not ask about the rest of our patrol. They did not look down into the shadow sector. The pilot kept his eyes fixed ahead, jaw locked tight. The helicopter climbed fast, as if the air behind us pressed upward. When we reached the temporary site, guards took Mason and Warren in separate directions. I never saw them together again. A medic checked me in silence. He wrote notes, then stopped halfway through and crossed out everything he had written. He told me to wait in a small tent. 2 hours passed. No one spoke to me. The wind carried a faint metallic scent from the canyon. I could still feel the slow pulse of the stone under my boots. A group of officers came in at last. They asked about the equipment, not the men. They asked about the rope, not the voices. When I told them about the disappearances, they wrote nothing. They asked me to stick to physical details only. They warned me not to add impossible claims. One officer folded his hands and said my memory might be under stress. Another said the canyon caused distorted perception. They all avoided the word lost. Later that night, I saw the official papers. The report called it a training mishap. It claimed a rock slide blocked the route and trapped the earlier patrol. It listed my own team as scattered by unstable ground. None of the names had the word missing beside them, only non-recovered. The shadow sector had no place on any map. I signed the form they gave me. They watched closely as I wrote my name. When I handed the pen back, the lead officer told me the mission did not exist. He said speaking of it would harm my record and my life. His tone made it clear the canyon was not the thing I should fear anymore. They released me the next morning. The sun looked bright, but the light felt thin, the way it had inside the sector. I stepped away from the tents and looked toward the distant ridges. The canyon lay quiet, still, as if nothing had ever happened. But my legs kept a faint memory of the pulses rising through stone. My ears kept the slow rhythm of that deep shifting weight. And when the wind changed, even outside the base, I could still smell metal and old dust drifting up from a place that refused to let go. They kept me on base for 2 more days. No reason given, no tasks assigned. I sat in a small room with a cot and a metal chair, listening to faint thumps from distant construction. Each sound carried that same slow rhythm I had felt inside the canyon. It stayed with me no matter how hard I tried to shut it out. On the 3rd day, they let me go. The captain walked me to the gate and handed me a sealed envelope marked with a clearance note. He told me not to open it unless ordered. I knew I never would. Men like us learned early that some papers were better left sealed. You carry them in silence until your hands grow old. I tried to find Warren after my exit. Every number I called led nowhere. His file ended with a short medical note that said he had been relocated for treatment. Mason left the service soon after. I heard he moved to a quiet town far from any canyon. He never answered my letters. I did not push him. Some men need distance to keep their minds steady. Years passed. I lived my life as best I could. But the shadow sector never left me. Sometimes, when standing on a steel bridge or near a rail yard, I felt the faint vibration under my boots, the same slow pattern rising from deep ground. It always came in the same calm rhythm, never rushed, never sharp, like something ancient shifting its weight somewhere far below. I avoided deserts after that. Wide open land gave me a strange tightness in the chest, as if the earth there remembered me. Once, during a long drive across Arizona, I caught a thin metallic scent through the window. My hands froze on the wheel. The horizon looked normal, but the smell stayed for a few breaths, steady and familiar. When it faded, I pulled to the side of the road and waited for my pulse to settle. I tried to speak to one analyst I knew from that time. He listened in silence, then asked if I had trouble sleeping. He told me the mind could replace stress. He did not believe me, or maybe he believed too much and did not want to admit it. Men in his position often chose silence over truth. One winter, I read a short science article about strange seismic readings under a remote stretch of the Grand Canyon. The article was replaced the next day with a correction. The correction said the data had been misinterpreted. The title of the withdrawn piece stayed in my mind: Deep Rhythmic Movement in an Unmapped Zone. I knew that phrase. I had lived inside it. I returned once to the rim, not near the sector, but far enough west to see the canyon's wide cut. I stood there at sunrise. The light felt normal, bright, and warm. Nothing strange moved. No scent drifted up. But the quiet carried a depth that reminded me of the place that took our patrol. I stayed only a few minutes. I left when the wind changed. I still think about the men who vanished. Byers, Cole, Holt, the lieutenant. I picture them walking in a place where distances bend and time folds in on itself. A place that does not let go of anyone who steps the wrong way. Their names never reached any memorial. Their families never learned the truth. Their story sits in the silence that the canyon keeps. And some nights, when the house settles or a truck rumbles down the road, I wake with the memory of that slow pulse rising through my legs. It fades after a few seconds, but the echo of it stays. The shadow sector gave back only 2 of us. It kept the rest somewhere far below, in a space that feels alive even now. I am an old man now. My hands shake more than they should. My memory drifts at times, but not when it comes to the shadow sector. Those days stay sharp, as if carved in the back of my mind. Some moments fade in life, but fear leaves clear marks. It always has. I do not tell people much about my service. There were other missions, other losses, but none reached as deep as that canyon. None stayed with me the same way. I still feel the slow pulse sometimes when I stand barefoot on the floor in the early morning. A faint, steady rhythm under the boards. It never lasts long. Just enough to remind me that the ground beneath us is not always still. I think about the men we lost. I picture them caught in some fold of stone, walking in paths that loop and shift. Not dead, not alive in the way we understand, just held by a place that bends time the way wind bends grass. I do not know if that thought brings comfort or fear. Maybe both. The official report said nothing true. It named no real cause. It erased half the patrol and left the rest of us in silence. I lived with that silence for many years. But silence does not honor men. Stories do, even stories no one may ever read. That is why I speak now. Not to accuse anyone, not to expose some hidden plan. Only to mark that those men lived, walked, and vanished in a real place with real weight. A place that still shifts under the desert sun. A place that feels awake. If someone finds these words long after I am gone, they may think I imagined it. They may say the canyon played tricks on my mind. I would understand. Some things do not fit inside one lifetime, but I know what I felt under my boots. I know the smell of metal and dust that rose from cracks too deep to measure. I know the sound of something moving far below, slow as time itself. The shadow sector never gave answers. It only took. And even now, in the quiet of my last years, I can still feel it breathing somewhere beneath the earth. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And for more amazing horror stories, just click the ones showing right now on your screen.